Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays and STORRS podcast, which you can find right here on the Court Store Media Network. I'm your host, Kanaye, and I want to start off by apologizing for no episode this past Saturday when it should have normally gone up, as it of course normally does. I had recorded my reaction to the Creighton loss as well as previewing the Villanova game, which went down this past Saturday. But unfortunately, the audio just came back all kind of messed up during the editing process. And by that point, I had no time to record another rerun of that episode before the Nova game on Saturday, which of course is unfortunate. And I'm sorry that you guys are getting this video late now on what is going to be the game day against St. John's in Hartford on Wednesday, February 25th. So again, I want to apologize for the late episode, but nonetheless, we got a lot to get to in this episode today. I'm going to break down my takeaways from both the Creighton game and the Villanova win, as well as quick preview for the St. John's matchup going down at People's Bank Arena in Hartford on the day you guys are seeing this. So a lot to get into. Hope to still keep it on the shorter end, but before we get into all of that today, please engage with the content you see on this channel in any way you can, whether it's liking, subscribing, or just telling other people about what we do here at the Court Storm. Everything goes a really long way with influencing YouTube's algorithm, getting more people to see our videos. Also, be sure to turn on your post notifications so you are the latest to see the newest videos that we get out to you guys. So let's get right into it and start with the Creighton game. Of course, that was a loss. The Huskies suffered their third of the year, second in Big East play. UConn lost 91-84 in this game. And really, I mean, it comes down to the defense. I think before the Nova game this past Saturday, you could make the argument that UConn's defense has just been so bad over the 2 week span leading up to the Nova game this past Saturday, where they just cannot guard the people on the perimeter. They can't stop the dribble drives. They get beat, which leads to them reaching in and fouling and putting a lot of teams on the line. That's a big thing that happened in this Creighton game. And to give up 91 points to a Creighton team that, well, if we're calling it for what it is not very good and is towards the bottom of the Big East this year. Yes, they have talented players, but Creighton's whole mantra is that we want to space you out. We want to facilitate. We want to play make for others. We want to shoot a lot of threes. And to let guys like Fedor Zugic, who got his first start as a Creighton Blue Jay in this game, by the way, as well as Josh Dix, two guys who it's not really their calling card, the more so pace and space type players. Add Nick Graves to that as well, where Nick Graves, I mean, no one can stay in front of Nick Graves in the second half. But to let these guys, I mean, get to the rim at will, finish consistently, beat you, blow by you, leading to UConn needing a foul, especially solo ball. I mean, just early in the game, two or one, I forget if it was one or two early blown assignments that solo ball had, which led to Dan Hurley pulling solo ball and replacing with Jaden Ross. That just can't happen, and that's been a big thing with solo. A lot of people were talking about going into the Nova game, whether Dan Hurley should make the move to pull solo out of the starting lineup for the game and insert Jaden Ross, just because solo ball really had not been able to defend very well until the Nova game. And when you consider a player that's struggled with confidence this year, especially in the three-point shot, where in the past you think, okay, he's going to knock down threes, he's going to be able to space things up on the floor for us, he's going to be able to consistently knock it down from beyond the arc. So if he is a liability on the defense on the floor, I guess that's the trade-off there. But when he's not making shots, then what do you have out of solo ball when you're throwing him out there? And I'm glad Dan Hurley stuck with his seniority, stuck with his loyalty to solo ball, and started him against Nova, just because when you're dealing with a guy who's already went through the ups and downs of having confidence issues, what happens once you bench them? I mean, where does their confidence go from there? I understand that, yes, he would provide a big scoring burst off our bench, but at the same time, I just don't know if it is worth having solo ball in the doghouse, because this is a guy that we need for the long run here this season. I mean, he's going to be pivotal. I'm still a believer you got to stick with solo ball. You got to back him. He's going to show up eventually. We're going to see the consistency come back. It's too early for me to give up on that this year. And I think solo ball, maybe the St. John's game, this is the coming out party where he really is here, and consistently follows it up, because he's had a couple good shooting performances between the games at Butler, Xavier. I might be forgetting one more that's in the mix there that led up to this Creighton game. But again, I think he's so crucial for how far UConn's going to be able to go this year. And let me say, when he is rolling and when the other guys are rolling, this offense is going to be tough to handle. And I will say that, speaking of offense, UConn did not really do great offensively in the second half. I mean, early on, I thought they did fine in the first half. They put up 45 points. And I mean, that's pretty good for trying to increase where you stand and the adjusted offensive efficiency metric on KenPom, where UConn currently stands 23rd, if I'm not mistaken, following the Villanova game, and 13th defensively. But of course, you got to be able to make shots. And I felt UConn was able to get their shots in the first half and knock them down. And then it was very much the opposite in the second. Braylon Mullins got hot towards the end of the first half. And then from there, he was really the only one that could get it going consistently. Braylon was great in this game. He had a lot of tough shots, a little bit inefficient overall, going 9 for 22. But he did finish with his UConn career high of 25 points with 6 threes to go for that on 6 for 11 from distance. Hey, I think there were a lot of really good shots that Braylon got down the stretch that he just wasn't able to hit. And that it is what it is with that. I mean, when you're getting your shots, that's you're not hitting them. It's kind of been the story of UConn this year, where I honestly felt that a lot of their offensive faults have been, yes, because of solo ball kind of struggling to be able to find consistency in the 3-point shot this year. Braylon Mullins, Terrace Reed being in and out of the lineup, and just not really having more than one creator on the team, where Silas is the only guy who can create off the dribble. I think that, a big reason, yes, those you can all point to those reasons as to why the offense has struggled this year, but still, I think that UConn, especially over the last month, has been able to get their shots. Just it's a pretty even split as to whether they hit them or not. And I feel like more times than not, we've seen them miss these shots. I feel like that's what leads to a lot of these closer games we've seen UConn play this year, especially in Big East play. And you hope that going forward, they get hot at the right time and, are able to do it to win out in Big East play, win the Big East tournament, and win 6 games in a row in March to cut down number 7. But again, I think in this game, it was really just the defense. AK was not really a factor. Dan Hurley talked about in his post-game press conference following the Creighton game how AK probably played hurt, probably should have rested. He was moving out there like a steamboat very slowly. I was there in person for this game, so I could very much tell that AK was a step or two slow. Terrace Reed, I thought was solid in this game. Both him and Eric Rybath felt had good minutes. The thing that I think frustrated me the most was how I felt that going to Terrace and Eric early in the game was working. Creighton didn't really have an answer for him. I thought they put pressure in the painted area on the rim. They were able to convert on a lot of their looks where they got especially Terrace, where he gets the dump down pass into the post. He's able to make his power move and go up and finish over the defender. And I just felt that they went away from that when they shouldn't have. And I think you continue to go through them throughout the duration of this game. It'll lead to, more easier looks instead of the tougher shots that UConn was trying to force up and take as the second half went on. But I mean, overall, I think that, this game was ugly defensively. It all comes down to UConn just not being able to stop the ball. They defended terribly. Nick Graves was outstanding down the stretch with 18 points. Josh Dix had 21, which I believe was his season high, if I'm not mistaken. Fedor Zugic, 14 in his first start as a Creighton Blue Jay. So it looked pretty bad coming out of that game. Obviously, that 2-week stretch leading up to this past Saturday, UConn's defense had taken a massive toll. I think in that 2-week span, they were the 150th best defense in the country, which obviously does not result in championships if we're talking big picture. And it's not telling of how good that UConn's defensive ceiling has been when it is at its ceiling this season. UConn has, I think, at their highest was the 5th best defense in the country. Now they fall into 3rd. Thankfully, it started to trend in the right direction against Villanova, which I'll talk about right now. UConn was able to win at Wells Fargo Arena in Philly, 73-63 this past Saturday. That final score is not telling of how dominant of a second half on the defensive end that UConn had. Early on, it did look a little scary. Very much felt like it was going to mirror some of the themes we saw from the Creighton game, where UConn was not able to guard guys on the perimeter. Bryce Lindsey was able to get it going. Tyler Perkins was able to get it going. And Caden Lewis was able to get it going really early on in probably the first 4 minutes of the game. And then from probably then on up until maybe the last 2 minutes of the second half, UConn's defense completely shut down Villanova. And I think that's what you need going forward. Villanova is a tough team. I don't think enough people give credit for where Kevin Willard has his program right now. Yes, they are not probably going to be competing to get to a second weekend this year, but I think they're a tournament lock right now in my eyes. And hey, there's a world where they can get to a Sweet 16. I think round of 32 is probably where I cap them off. But nonetheless, very strong first year for Kevin Willard back in the Big East, taking over that Villanova program for Cal Neptune. I think that really just being able to limit the opportunities that Villanova was getting down the road was huge. And, shutting down the scores that they have. I mean, Bryce Lindsey's been one of the under-talked about players across the country, and they held him to only 3 shot attempts on, 7 points overall. Matt Hodge, they were able to really restrict in the paint in the second half. I felt that their defense on Duke Brennan was really outstanding. And Tyler Perkins, I think Tyler Perkins, he had a hot start, but second half came around. He wasn't really able to get anything going. I think a lot of that falls on Silas Demery, the defense he plays on the perimeter. And while he didn't play great offensively in this game, I'll touch on that in a little bit. Silas, he was great with what he did on the defensive end. Thought Braylon defended really well. I think Braylon, people look at it two ways. Yes, he does get beat sometimes, but I think that is just because he's a freshman and he has a slight frame. It's evident he's trying out there. He's just not Steph Castle. Steph Castle did not play, nor was he built like a freshman. And not every freshman is going to come into college basketball defending at the level Steph Castle is. I mean, if you watch Castle in the NBA right now, he's probably a top five, on-ball defender. You saw the defense he applied to Kate Cunningham against the Pistons 2 nights ago when you guys are going to be seeing this episode. So it's a lot easy. Normal freshmen don't defend the way Steph Castle did when he was in STORRS. But Terrace Reed, I think Terrace Reed was great in this game. I thought he was physical. I think he did a great job in protecting the rim with 3 blocks. And I don't think that Terrace gets enough credit for his length. Yes, he's no 7'1", 7'2" monster that Donovan Clayton was, but he's pushing 7 feet. He's got the length. Eric Ryba felt was strong off the bench as well and played strong in the minutes that he got. Jay Ross, Jalen Stewart. It was great seeing both of them get going offensively in this game. Jay Ross with 4 points, was able to get to the line, so nice seeing him draw some fouls when this is a very foul-needy team in UConn this year where they just don't seem to be able to draw fouls very consistently and get to the line. Jalen Stewart, I thought great seeing him go 2 for 2 from beyond the arc. He had some big shots early on and a nice 3 in the second half. Just, getting back to the level of defender I know him to be because he did not defend very well at all in the Creighton game. That's a guy who was guarding Eric Dixon last year, the country's leading scorer last season. And I know he's a much better defender than what he's shown over the last 2 weeks. So seeing him kind of get back to the normal Stewie that we know on the defensive end against Villanova was big time. He tends to play really well against Villanova in his years in STORRS so far. And Braylon Mullins, I think he had timely shots in the first half and again defended well. AK looked closer to being his normal self. He finished with 12 points in this game. I thought he moved a lot better, was not able to knock down a 3-point shot, granted, but nonetheless, still what he's able to do just all around and being a contributor. He had 2 blocks, I think a steal or 2 to add to that as well. 5 rebounds, able to get on the glass. And let me just say, this was a complete total effort win. No one guy really just starred and stole the show, but everyone was able to contribute and play their role, which I felt was really good to see. I think it's good to see just a combined, complete effort where no one guy, again, is really doing it all himself, where you're getting contributions from everyone. The bench really played well in this game when the bench really hasn't contributed all too much in the games lately. You got 4 from Jay Ross, like I mentioned, 6 from Stewie, 8 from Eric, 4 from Mally. I think that's what you need going forward because I thought that this was one of, if not the deepest teams in the country going into the season. And early on, it looked like, that very much is the case. But as we got into Big East play, I feel like some guys are more matchup oriented, like a Malachi, for example, like an Eric, for example. But you need these guys to show up game in and game out because the depth is what's going to help you win in March. It's what the 22-23 team, what made them so good. Their ability to go 8, 9 deep even when they had to. And just having guys who can contribute at any given moment and score when needed, defend at a high level, play make, and just play team basketball, make the tough hustle, glue guy winning plays, and you need that from your bench. And to have a game like this that we got from the bench, from UConn's bench, that's great. And I hope it continues going forward, especially tonight when you guys are seeing this against the Johnnies, because Rick Pitino and St. John's, they don't look like they're slowing down anytime soon. So I think now is a fair time to get into my preview for this game against the number 15 ranked St. John's Red Storm against the number 6 Connecticut Huskies. Now, of course, we all know how the first matchup went, and I think that's one that you kind of just chalk up like, hey, you're going on the road to a very, very hungry St. John's team that needs their best resume win in the season, and they were able to get it. St. John's was the beneficiary of a very true home crowd in Madison Square Garden that is going to be the complete polar opposite tomorrow night or tonight when you guys are seeing this in Hartford, where I expect the place to be bumping. You don't always get the best crowds in Hartford as opposed to Gamble Pavilion, but nonetheless, when it is a big game, the Hartford crowd shows up. I think back to Marquette 2 years ago when that was a top 5 matchup. A lot of that is going to be dependent on, again, the defense. The defense needs to show up. UConn did not defend St. John's well at all at MSG 2 weeks back now. I think that they were not able to stop Dylan Darling on the perimeter. Dylan Darling was huge for them in that game. And now that Ian Jackson is going to be missing several games for the Johnnies with what I believe was an ankle injury, if I'm not mistaken, he's more than likely going to be starting tomorrow night. You think back to the defensive ball pressure he applied on Silas Demery and Malachi Smith at the Garden 2 weeks ago. That worries me a lot. Silas turned the ball over 9 times in a game. He turned the ball over 7 times, if I'm not mistaken, against Villanova this past Saturday. And Villanova's a pretty solid defensive team this year. I worry for Silas. Silas has not a great track record going up against the Johnnies. I talked about this on my St. John's recap several weeks ago on this podcast, where he had 10 turnovers in the Battle for Atlantis game when he was with Georgia playing against the Johnnies in that tournament a season ago. This year at the Garden, he had 9 turnovers against Rick Pitino. This is a guy that Rick Pitino went after very, very strongly in the transfer portal this past offseason. So he knows all about Silas. He's watched an incredible amount of his game film. He's played against the guy twice now. So I'm really curious to see the approach that both Silas and the coaching staff takes to try to get around some of the defensive pressure and game planning that Rick Pitino, Dylan Darling, and company are going to be applying on Silas in this game on Wednesday night. I think that Silas needs to look to have a much cleaner slate in this game than what he did at MSG. And I think he needs to look to be aggressive early. You think back to that game where he had the big scoring second half. He dunked on Zuby Ejiofor, hit the three in the corner, was able to get to the rim, get to the line. I know he missed the free throws at the end, but I'm assuming he was probably really tired in that game. And other guys got to show up. Having Silas aggressive early on is going to open things up. Him being able to get paint touches is going to open things up. But guys got to knock down shots. Braylon had a really hot start where he had some really incredibly tough shots. And I just think that St. John's wasn't used to his release speed at that point in the game. But second half, they put more lengthier, athletic guys on Braylon. I think Braylon struggled with trying to get himself free and being able to get off clean looks in that second half. I think that I still worry of an assignment like Bryce Hopkins, Dylan Mitchell guarding AK, just because I don't think that's the most ideal matchup when AK has more of a natural 3-man, more athletic 4 running around, chasing him off staggers and pin downs. So that's definitely going to be something to watch still. I understand AK. It really was a solid game overall, honestly. It just was a quiet 17. I think the thing that remains or kind of lingers in my mind is the forced take when he was trying to foul bait going to the basket late in the game and didn't get the call, led to a turnover. And I think, Terrace Reed needs to show up. He needs to, early on, he looked to establish himself early in that St. John's game, and I hope he does that and then continues to do it throughout the entire game this time around as opposed to last time. I understand Terrace did have a little bit of foul trouble, if I'm not mistaken, in that matchup 2 weeks back, going back 2 weeks now. Eric Ryba, I look to hopefully have a big bounce-back performance from what he did against Zuby Ejiofor for the first time in his collegiate career. It's tough to go up against Zuby for the first time as a freshman, and hopefully Eric learned from that experience. He's able to stay on the floor and be playable and a viable option in this game, both scoring and defensively. And Mally, I hope Mally's able to kind of figure things out. I hope the bench had a good performance on the road against a strong Villanova team. Hope that carries over for the bench guys in this game going forward, because we need a full 9-man rotation, 9-man, showing tonight again against St. John. So I think really it comes down to the big things. You got to limit the turnovers from Silas and overall, and you got to make shots. You got to defend. You got to continue the defensive effort that you carried on for the majority of that Villanova game, and look to hopefully get a full 40 minutes out of this team for the first time this season, just because I still believe in the ceiling this UConn team has. I know that they've probably fallen off the 1 seed line following their loss to Creighton last week, but the ability to chase the top 2 seed, to be able to play in the East region, it's fully there. With some of the losses that have happened towards the top of the sport, I also think that a 1 seed is not out of the question just yet. But nonetheless, I think there's a true argument to be made that it might just be better off being the top 2 seed and getting to be able to play in the East region in DC as opposed to having to go to Houston. And I understand Duke's probably going to win the East region, but when you consider the late game coaching faults John Shire's had in his time coaching at Duke, I think that's a winnable region. But of course, it's still February. We got to see how everything shapes out. But yeah, overall, I'm pumped for this game. Biggest game of the Big East season. St. John's currently holds possession of the Big East lead, and UConn win tomorrow night would mean that if both teams win out, then they would share a Big East regular season championship. So that's what you hope for. Hope to get this win. Hope to, position yourself to be able to be a top 2 seed in the Big East tournament, which I think will probably be the case nonetheless. But still put yourself in position to be a Big East regular season champion. Got to come out hard. Rick Pitino, St. John's, they're not going to back off. They're still rolling right now, but you got to welcome into the doghouse tomorrow night and hopefully take home a Husky win. But that's going to take care of everything for me on this episode today. Again, I apologize for the late episode, but definitely be on the lookout for my recap of St. John's and UConn game that tonight that should hopefully be going up on Saturday this time. But until then, I'll see you all next time.